Iris lies awake in bed, deep in thought, while her husband sleeps beside her. Quietly, she gets up, grabs a toy boat and a Swiss Army knife and heads out. She drives to Massey Big Sur State Park to go hiking. At the mountain trail, she pauses, her gaze fixed on the path as if she's bracing for a battle. Holding the red toy boat, she begins her hike up to the mountaintop. At the summit, she stops at her son's memorial, where he is remembered after an accidental fall. She wipes the dust from the frame with her sleeve, then carves her family's initials into a nearby tree as tears slip down her cheeks. After carving, she approaches the edge of the mountain, ready to release herself from the weight of her guilt. Just as she is about to take her final step, a man named Richard interrupts her suicide attempt. Richard tries to be friendly and convinces her to reconsider what she is about to do. When he notices her hesitation, he shares a heartbreaking story of his girlfriend, who died in a car accident while he was driving. Touched by his story, Iris steps back from the edge and opens up to Richard. She tells him how Mateo had been in her care that day, how she had looked away for just a moment. She admits she blames herself for his fall, for his life cut short. As she speaks, she feels a flicker of something familiar yet distant understanding. Together, Iris and Richard descend the trail in silence, the weight of their shared grief lingering unspoken between them. When they reach the parking area, she notices Richard's car is parked tightly beside hers, making it awkward for her to reach her door. As she fumbles to get in, distracted, Richard suddenly approaches her again, holding an umbrella. In an instant, he tases her, restrains her with zip ties, and drives off with her in his back seat. After regaining consciousness, she panics and tries to use her smartwatch to call for help. But Richard tells her it's no use, the watch has no signal here. Fortunately, Iris discovers the Swiss Army knife still with her. Heart racing, she begins to saw through her binds, keeping Richard distracted with hesitant, friendly conversation. As soon as the binds snap, she lunges at him from behind, causing the car to veer off the road and crash into a tree. Following the impact, they both struggle to overpower each other and eventually tumble out of the vehicle. Iris frees her legs, but as Richard moves closer, he reveals his final cruelty. He's injected her with a paralyzing drug, one that will gradually strip her of motor function over the next 20 minutes. With her heart pounding and time slipping away, Iris bolts into the dense woods, her breath sharp and unsteady. Richard follows closely, savoring the chase. As she runs, she counts each second she has left and sets a timer on her watch just as the numbness begins to set in. When Richard is about to catch up, she hides under a tree, but an ant swarm forces her to abandon her spot. To escape, she crawls to a nearby stream and lets herself float downstream, her body chilled but concealed by the water. The current carries her to the riverbank, where she crawls onto dry land, gripping the dirt to pull herself forward. But her strength fades, and she collapses just as her watch's 20-minute timer expires. Bill, a man living alone in a remote cabin, discovers Iris paralyzed while mowing his lawn. With Iris able to blink for yes and no responses, Bill carefully places her in a wheelbarrow and brings her inside. Just as he picks up the phone to call the police, there is a knock on the door. Bill opens it to find Richard, who introduces himself as Andrew and spins a story about his wife, who he claims went missing after an accident. Suspicious, Bill promises to call for help and closes the door. Undeterred, Richard sneaks into the house, peering around as he searches for signs of Iris. Furious, Bill orders him to leave, but Richard insists on using the phone, claiming he's lost his own. Suddenly, Richard's phone rings, shattering his story and making Bill realize Richard poses a threat. When Bill excuses himself, Richard snatches the phone from his hand. Reacting quickly, Bill shoves Richard into a bookcase and manages to dial 911. Enraged, Richard lunges at Bill with murderous intent, but Bill punches him in the abdomen several times, then strikes him with a nearby lamp, knocking him to the floor. Bill kicks him and orders him to stay down, but Richard grabs a knife and stabs Bill in the Achilles tendon. After a desperate struggle, Richard plunges the knife into Bill's chest, killing him. With authorities now on the way, Richard grabs a gasoline can from the storeroom and douses the cabin's interior, setting it ablaze to erase all traces of his crime. Just as he's about to drive off in Bill's truck, a slight movement in the cabin's window catches his eye. The blinds shift ever so slightly. He freezes, then heads back inside, where he finds Iris crouched in the shadows, her fingers twitching as she grips the blinds. The effects of the drug are fading just enough for her to prepare for her last stand. Richard drives off with Iris, his expression tense as police cars speed toward the burning remains of Bill's house. While driving, he receives a call from his wife, Lizzie, and is frustrated to learn that his family has decided to join him for his solo weekend in the woods. planning to arrive at his cabin later that evening. They stop at a gas station to refuel, and Iris sees an opportunity. She reaches for the door handle, but Richard catches her, snapping it shut. Her brief struggle catches the attention of a nearby woman, who discreetly calls the police. Unfazed, Richard drives to his wrecked car, intending to tow it with Bill's truck. Soon, a police officer arrives, responding to the woman's call. Richard maintains his composure, claiming that his wife, referring to Iris, was drunk and crashed the car. The officer appears sympathetic, but when he leans in to speak to Iris, she manages to whisper a single word, "Help!" The officer senses something is wrong and reaches for his gun, but Richard reacts swiftly, attacking with deadly precision. The officer falls, and Richard quickly stashes the body in the patrol car. With cold efficiency, he sets both the patrol car and his own wrecked vehicle ablaze. As flames flicker in his rearview mirror, Richard steers the stolen truck back onto the road, leaving behind another scene of destruction and Iris with dwindling hope for escape. As they drive, Iris confronts Richard, suggesting he lost his mind after his girlfriend died. Richard, unbothered, replies that he actually found clarity after the crash. He describes how he still feels the angle of her neck and remembers the way light reflected off the glass in her lap. He relives that moment over and over, feeling like a god. When Iris asks what his last words to his girlfriend were, he responds, "Thank you for bringing clarity to my life." Attempting to get inside his head, Iris talks about her own loss, hoping to draw a parallel with his girlfriend's death. But Richard brushes it off, admitting that forgetting is never easy. Iris then tries a different approach, convincing him that if he lets her go, she won't say anything about what happened. But when she suggests he's broken like she is, he becomes furious and changes his mind. Instead of taking her to the cabin, he decides to drive to a remote pier. Seizing her chance, Iris stabs Richard with a syringe filled with a paralyzing drug, but she's still too weak to push down the plunger. Struggling against him, she asks why he didn't just let her die at the cliff. Richard smirks, claiming that their experience together has given her a new appreciation for life. Richard leads Iris to a small boat, his intentions unmistakable. He plans to end her life here, as he had done with his other victims. He rows her out onto the lake, preparing for his final act. But as he readies himself, Iris starts to cry, pleading with Richard to take Mateo's toy boat from her pocket and place it on his memorial stone. When he leans in to retrieve it, she seizes the opportunity, grabbing the knife from his back and plunging it into his throat. Blood spills as Richard gurgles, and she shoves him overboard. He thrashes in the water, desperately reaching for the edge of the boat, but his gun slips from his grasp and falls into the rowboat. With quick reflexes, Iris snatches it up, steadies her trembling hands, and fires. The bullet strikes Richard, and his body sinks beneath the dark water. Damaged by the gunfire, the rowboat begins to sink. Iris holds her breath as she plunges beneath the surface. After a moment, she resurfaces and swims back toward the pier. When she reaches the shore, she sees Richard has also made it back, struggling against his injuries. Iris approaches him, her voice steady as she says, "Thank you," a gratitude for helping her rediscover her will to live. She then leaves him to die slowly from his gruesome wounds, and the story concludes. If you like this video, subscribe and press the bell icon for the latest updates.